Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. My name is Nader. In this video, we're going to go over a bunch of exercises together on NPM. We learned about NPM in the previous video, and I mentioned that this is something not technically part of JavaScript, but so fundamental and core to learning about working with JavaScript just throughout our journey with the programming language, web development, and backend development, and all sorts of development. It's really central to actually learning to use JavaScript in general. So these exercises are really meant to build that understanding. We're going to be using NPM quite a lot going forward as we build projects. In fact, there's really no way to really avoid using it for the most part. And we're going to go over CommonJS syntax as well as the ES module syntax for different types of packages, just so we can get more practice with both methods. Let's just get right to the exercises. Okay, so we have a warm-up exercise as well as 3 regular exercises to go through. And as with the other exercise videos, I'm just going to kind of go over the comments that I have written up top. And I'll kind of give you a bit of a walkthrough. Then I'll give you a chance to go through it yourself. Once you've given it a shot, then we'll go through a possible solution that I'll write out and give you some commentary on together. So for the warm-up, I would like you to create a folder called Warmup. And then inside of this folder, I want you to run the npm init, short for initialize command. And this is going to create a default package JSON file for us. We saw this in the previous npm video on kind of how it asks for your name and all these sorts of different information. And you can either fill that in or you can just spam enter to kind of skip most of that process as we did together previously, since it doesn't really matter for this video or for these exercises, frankly. But once we have a package JSON, we then want to add the type module to that package JSON, which is going to enable us to actually use ES modules instead of the default, which is CommonJS, which we also saw previously. Then comes the interesting parts. So you're going to want to make sure that you're inside of the warmup folder for pretty much all of these steps, including the package JSON. Okay. We want to use npm install to install the lodash-es package. We did this together in the previous video, hence why this is the warm-up as well. It's a bit of a easier one than the next ones coming up. Then we want to create a file inside of this warm-up folder called main.js, and we want to import the camel case function from the package lodash. Okay. Then we want to use this function by passing it a string. And as you can probably imagine, camel case takes a string and basically turns it into a camel case, right? Which is a lowercase first letters and uppercase for every other words. So in this case, I love JavaScript is an example that you can pass it and it'll turn that string into a camel case version of that string, and we can print it out to make sure it actually works. And you can use Node to actually run the main.js file and make sure it works as intended and you're actually importing the package correctly. So there's quite a bit of steps here. And again, this is just a different setup with these exercises since we're now working with folders. As a bonus, just if you want a bit more practice, I encourage you to actually hunt down the camel case function, which is actually a file inside of the node modules folder after you've done the npm install and made sure that everything works. And you can take a read through it to see if you can kind of understand a bit of what's actually going on, and that really there's no magic going on behind the scenes. We're just making use of a pre-built function by other developers so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. So that was a lot of me yapping. I'll give you a chance to go through it yourself and then we'll go through it together. Okay, so to start here, let's create a warm-up folder. So I'm just going to come over here and I'm going to create a new folder in my VS Code. I'll call this warm-up. And then inside of this folder, I need to start running these commands. So I'm just going to pull up my terminal here. And we can see that if I do an ls, I'm actually inside of my code folder for this particular set of exercises. So now I want to go to this warm-up folder, right? Which is this one right here. So I can do a cd command and I can say warm-up, just like that, right? And now if I do an ls, it's blank and there's nothing inside of this folder, okay? So inside of here, I want to run npm init. I'm going to do this like the enter spam way first, and then I'll show you a shortcut later on since that gets a bit annoying pretty quickly. I'm going to run npm init. It's going to ask me a whole bunch of questions. This is going to get blurred out by my face, but I'm just pressing enter a whole bunch of times as you can see. And then it's like, yes, that's totally fine. Thank you very much. And then I'm going to clear out that console. What we can see is that created over here on the left-hand side inside of my warmup folder, that package.json file, right? So if I open up that file, we'll see that it's kind of created all those defaults in there. And, we're not really going to be using any of these things right now. Okay. So then what we want to do is we want to add this type module to the package.json so that we can actually use ES modules, because the package that we're going to be using, which is low-es, does use ES modules. And we'll see examples of packages that don't use ES modules and the difference between them shortly. So for this, I'm just going to come down here. It doesn't really matter where you add this as long as you add it somewhere in here correctly. And again, this is JSON, not JavaScript. So be careful to have double quotes around your keys. And in this case, the value is also a string, so double quotes for that. Okay, now we want to create a main.js file inside of this folder and then import our camel case from low-es. What I didn't do is install low-es. Let me do that really quick. So again, I want to make sure I'm inside of my warmup folder, right, which I am. And then if I do npm install low-es, that's going to go out to npm.js, and it's going to download the code for that library and install it into my node modules folder. You can see it also added the package lock, which we're not going to really mess with, and has some extra information about the dependencies in there. Now, what we want to do is create our main.js. I can do this a few ways. For now, I'll just do the kind of easy way here. I'll just right-click warmup, new file, and I'll do main.js. So now I have my main.js file, and we want to import something from this low-es package. So to do that, we are going to use the ES module syntax. So import, and then this is going to use the brackets and named export that's coming out of the low-es package. So I'm saying from low-es-es. Now we covered that with ES modules and Node specifically. If we're using this syntax right here, that is going to look for that package inside of Node modules, because we're not doing like a / or some kind of folder specifier or an absolute file, for example, right? So this is going to tell Node, hey, I know that this is not a file that I have somewhere. Look inside the Node modules folder to find this by default. And once we've done that, we can look in here, and then we have this camel case function that's inside of there. All right. Now, you just have to trust that camel case is in there. We'll look at kind of how this might work in a second. But I said that we can actually pass this a string, right? So I said, let's pass it the string I love JavaScript to test it out. So let's do that. I'm going to say const, I'll just say result is equal to calling our camel case function with this string, I love JavaScript, and then I want to console.log out that result. Okay, and again, this function is coming from low-es, right? And the code for that is somewhere in Node modules. Okay, and if we wanted to learn about this function, we could go to their website or go to NPM or even their GitHub repository and look through that code or look through the documentation to understand how it works. Now, to actually run this, I'm going to run node and then main.js. And then there we go. I get my camel cased version of my string, I love JS, and that looks pretty great. Okay, cool. So that works. So for the bonus, I wanted to see if we could find out where this is coming from and a bit of maybe how the internals of this camel casing is working, right? So we're using this function, which is coming from low-es. So that means that it's inside Node modules, right? So if I open up Node modules, what we'll see is a low-es folder. And we can have many of these folders, the more modules that we end up adding, and we'll see that in the next set of exercises. But for now, we just have this one. So if I open this up, oh my goodness, right? An explosion of files. So I can actually use this search here over here on the left-hand side of VS Code to search for a camel case, but I'm just going to scroll down because usually these are in alphabetical order in VS Code. So I'm going to look for CA, and there we go, camelcase.js right here, right in the C section after all the underscores. So if I open that up, we can see that there's quite a bit going on in here, right? So we have some documentation here. It's saying that it's going to convert a string to camel case, some information about the parameters and the return values, and maybe like some examples of how to actually use it. And over here, we see that it's actually using some imports, right? And it's using imports from itself, from within its own set of modules, right? So the folks that wrote Lodash, which is a whole bunch of wonderful people all across the world. In fact, you can actually contribute to this library yourself if you like. Have collectively over many, many years written more and more efficient versions of these files, and they've just packaged them all up into this one nice big library called Lodash, where we can do some of these nice things. So you can see that they're actually doing reusable things in some of these bits of code in some of these modules, like a capitalization module and whatever the heck this create compounder is. I have no idea what that is. But if we scroll down here, we can see the actual meat of this code is right here. And we have a function effectively, right? That is, for some reason, they're calling create compounder, whatever this does. And we have this function that is doing some stuff with the word that we pass it. And then returning some kind of result. Now this code looks a little bit wonky because there's like a bunch of like modularity that they've added to this over time, because there's a lot of string functions they have in this package. So they want to make it as reusable as possible, so they're not repeating code all over the place. But effectively, you can see that they start by lowercasing it, and then they do something like maybe capitalizing certain parts of this word, otherwise maybe like returning the word by itself or something like that. And then we'd have to look at this create compounder function as well as a capitalize function to actually figure out exactly how this works. So we kind of would start going down a pretty big rabbit hole. I encourage you to go down that rabbit hole with something like capitalize. I don't think it would be valuable to go down that with something like create compounder right now, because this is a bit more advanced of a concept in JavaScript, where we are kind of returning functions out of functions and kind of doing some things inside there to make them a bit more reusable or add extra functionality, which we'll get into in the more advanced videos later on. Okay, so the most important takeaway from this exercise is the setup, how to actually work with the package JSON, how to run the npm install commands, and then probably most importantly, how to actually realize that this stuff is actually in here, like it's physically in here, downloaded from the internet, in this case, downloaded from NPM.js, the website, and we can actually use these files just as if we had written them ourselves manually and actually import from them, which is pretty amazing, right? Okay, so that is the warm-up exercise. Now, before we go to exercise 1, I just want to pull up my Google real quick, and I just want to show you kind of, if you wanted more information on this, where would you go? So if I pull up Google, I'm just going to search for NPM, and what we'll see is the NPM.js.com website. So if we go over there, we'll do this for each of the packages. In the search bar here, I'm going to search for Lodash. And this is the one that's not ES Moduleified yet, if that's a word. And then we're using this one right here, which is the ES Module version of the CommonJS one. So if I click on that one, you'll see that this is the Lodash library. We saw this in the previous video. We can explore the code. So if I click on this website here, Lodash, it will actually open up their website. If I click on this one, it'll open up their code. So if I just go to Lodash website real quick, we'll see that this is a modern JavaScript utility library that delivers modularity, performance, and extras. Fantastic. So they have some information on how to install it and why it's used. If we click on their documentation, what we can see is that they have a whole host of really, really fun functions all the way down here, probably hundreds of them, right? Kebab case, look at that. Amazing. I love kebabs. Try that one out as well for more practice if you like, okay? So definitely a lot of stuff to unpack here. And if you're interested, I encourage you to actually kind of cross-reference that with their GitHub repo, where you can actually read through their actual code, or you can just download the code in the node modules and then kind of look through it that way. Okay, perfect. So let's go through to exercise number 1. Okay, so for this one, we want to create a folder again, right? So we're going to create folders for all these exercises. So we're going to get in the routine of that, and it's going to be called exercise 1. Inside of exercise 1, we want to run npm init. I'll do this slightly faster this time so you can see an alternative to create our package JSON file. Then we want to add type module to our package JSON so that we can use ES modules. And then I want you to install a package called chalk. Okay, like the white, not the whiteboard, the blackboard chalk, right? A really, really awesome package. I love using it. In fact, it's used by pretty much every tool that we're going to be using in JavaScript behind the scenes. Then we want to create another file called main.js, just like we did together. We want to import Chalk. And to do this, you want to refer to their documentation on their NPM.js page or their GitHub page to actually see how this works. And I'm going to kind of leave it a bit more open-ended so you get more practice with that. Then we want to use Chalk to print out some strings, but in different colors to our terminal. So you can try things like blue and red and actually see how that differs as output inside of your actual terminal. So I'll leave this a bit more open-ended so you can get more practice with it and have more fun and be creative. And to run your file, you're just going to run main.js with Node, just like we did in the previous warm-up. And what you should see is whatever strings that you pass to it, if you console log out those strings, it will actually get colored in our terminal. Well, so we'll see like blue colors and red colors and whichever colors you end up using. Okay. Now, as a bonus, I'd like you to open up the dependencies or where you think the dependencies might be for Chalk and see, what other libraries or modules does Chalk really rely on and how many are there and what might they be? And is there any kind of did you expect there to be more of them or less of them? Did you expect it to be totally standalone? Really, really interesting question. So definitely poke around in there and try to figure out where those dependencies, which are the other packages that it relies on, might be. So give that a shot yourself and then we'll go over it together. All right. So we're going to start by just kind of creating this folder and then creating the files, and I'll go through NPM, the website, and the Chalk documentation as well, just so we can get more practice with that. So I'm going to create a new folder. Not a new file, a new folder, and this is going to be exercise 1. And inside of exercise 1, I want to run my npm init command, right? So I'm just going to clear out my terminal. I'm going to cd app up. I'm back inside my code folder now, and then I'm going to cd to exercise 1. And now I'm inside my exercise 1 folder. Okay, so if I do an ls, there's nothing in here. So I can now do an npm init. So I'm going to run this npm init, and then there's a -y command, which is going to just skip all that enter for us, right? So if we do npm init -y, that's going to just quickly create the JSON for us without actually asking us questions, so we don't have to spam the enter key. So you can see that it actually created this package JSON. So this one is going to use ES Modules, so I'm actually going to do a type module in here again. So that's saved in there. And then I'm going to npm install Chalk. Perfect. So now we can see that we have our dependencies is Chalk, which was part of the bonus, and I want to show you something else shortly after. But now we have Chalk in here as a dependency, and it's version 5.1.2, at least for this video. Perfect. So how do we actually use this, right? So let's go back to NPM. I'm going to go to Google, go to NPM, pull up their webpage. I'm going to search for Chalk. And here we can see this is Chalk, right? Terminal string styling done right. I'm very confident. So if I click on that, we're going to land on this very colorful page, right? So our goal is to do this kind of stuff right here, right? Really pretty, kind of like background color changing or foreground text font changing, stuff like that. If we scroll down a little bit, so actually before I scroll down, let me just show you this here. On the right-hand side, we saw that we can do npm install Chalk. I is just the alias for install. We can look at their GitHub repository if we want. Look at this, 179 million weekly downloads. That's pretty amazing, very popular. And if we scroll down, usually they'll have a section either on their GitHub page or on their npm page on how to actually install it and then use it. So here we have an install section. We did this already. It says it's ES Modules, so that's pretty great. We already have that working. So then they say to use it, you simply do import Chalk. Let me zoom in even a little bit more here. Import Chalk from Chalk. So it looks like that. I would probably guess that this is the default export because we don't have a named export brackets around this. And then we can do a console log. And then we can take Chalk and then we can give it a color. So we can say like .blue, and we can give it a string. And this, in theory, will give us a blue string that says hello world, and then we can console log that string out. All right, so let's see if this actually works. So let's import Chalk and then use this kind of coloring to it to see if we can actually console log it out. So I'm going to create a main.js file. So I'm going to go to exercise 1. I'm going to do a main.js. And inside of here, I'm going to say import Chalk from Chalk. There we go. Then I'm going to say I'm going to say blue string is equal to chalk.blue. And in here, I can give it some text, right? So I'm going to say, OMG, is this really blue, right? I should have probably said like, is this blue, WD, but that would probably age me quite a bit. So I won't do that for those of you that know what that is. Now I'll do console.log blue string. And let's try this out. So I'm going to run a node and I'm going to run main.js, and fingers crossed we get blue. And oh, I mean, like not really blue, but kind of blue, I guess. I guess that's what they classify as blue. I'm a bit confused by that. I'm gonna just try a different color. Let's see what we get here. If I do red, what do we get? Okay, that's pretty red. Let's do green maybe. I'll do green, look at that. And there we go, we get some green text, right? So you might have seen tools using NPM that actually have different colors and like emojis and like kind of like animations and stuff like that on them. And this is one of those tools that actually really helps those kind of command line interfaces at least build out things that are a bit easier and more pleasing on the eye. Usually you can do things that you can imagine where you can print out things that are going really well with a success as kind of green for the user, for the developer that's using your tool. And then like an error, for example, might be in red. You know, you could have this blue. I feel like I'm colorblind when I'm like looking at this. I'm pretty sure this is purple, but let's just say it's blue because that's what Chalk is saying. Yeah, you could use that for any other colors. And they have a whole bunch of colors, right? So if we go back, you can actually change the background if you want. You can do bold. You can do like all this other kind of crazy stuff. And you can do a whole bunch of really custom stuff. If you look at their API down here, you can you scroll through a whole bunch of fun stuff over here. You can see they have italic, this, and this, all these different colors. Pretty sure you can even give your own hex colors. Yeah, there you go. You can give your own hex colors, which is pretty amazing, right? So great package. Don't want to go too far with this because I just want to give you that tool so you can actually play around with it yourself and get experience with it. But this is a good example of something that would actually be very, very, very painful to code ourselves. And let's take a look really quick at how painful it might actually be. So that's going to get us to our bonus exercise for this, which is what are the dependencies and what does it rely on and where do we find that, right? So if we look at package.json, we can see that our project relies on Chalk, right? So this is the dependencies for our project. But maybe does Chalk itself rely on other things? Right? Or is it totally just JavaScript all vanilla by itself? So if we open up the package.lock or package-lock.json, we can actually look at the dependency trees. Okay. There's other ways to do this as well, but this is one of the easier ways. So we can see that we have Chalk needed here. And in this case, it looks like we just have Chalk and it has no dependencies supposedly. So it just kind of works by itself. Normally what we would see is kind of a set of other dependencies that Chalk would rely on to actually get itself to work. So if it used like other node modules that it needed from NPM, these would all be listed in here for us. And we could actually look at the versions of each of them and which versions of node they run on and kind of all this different extra information about how those packages actually work. So if I open up the node modules, we can look at Chalk. And inside here, we can look at their package.json file, right? And if we kind of scroll down in here, you can see that when they're actually kind of building out this tool, they have their own set of dependencies, but that's only when the developers are using this tool and they're actually kind of building it and working with it to actually publish it for the rest of us to actually use. But the regular dependencies, I don't know where they are. I have to look for them. I guess they actually don't have any regular dependencies. They only have the developer dependencies, which is why we don't see any dependencies for this tool. So this package.json really contains quite a lot of information. I encourage you to look through it so you can get a sense of what a more complicated and robust open source tool like Chalk would actually look like. It'll give you some kind of hints as to how these things are structured and how they have a whole bunch of infrastructure kind of around them. Definitely don't need to understand pretty much any of this to start. Just over time, the more that you read these files, the better and more familiar you'll get with some of the terms used and some of the like key value pairs and just kind of things like, oh, there's some testing going on here, some benchmarking going on here, right? And what does that mean? What kind of versions of Node does this support, right? And what do all these different symbols mean? And there's a whole bunch of really fun stuff that we can look at. And if we're interested, we can look at some of these build tools to actually investigate that a little bit deeper as well. Okay, so the source code looks to be in here as well. So if you're interested, definitely take a look at this. It looks like they have their index file. I get too excited sometimes. I hesitate to open up all these, but you can see they have a whole bunch of exports in here. If we open up their index.js, you can see their export default chalk, which is actually what we imported to actually make this function work. And that's listed right here, right? That's exactly what we're importing. It's inside of their index.js file. So enough with that. Don't want to get you too confused, but that's where you'd go if you do want more information. Perfect. Let's go to exercise 2. Okie dokes. So for this one's going to be a bit different. We're going to be using CommonJS for this one to get a bit more practice with that. So we want to do the same things here. We want to create a new folder. It's going to be called exercise 2. And inside exercise 2, we want to do the same thing. We want to do an npm init to create our package.json file. So note again, we don't need to do a type module for this, right? This package that we're using doesn't support ES modules. This is an older style of package that uses the CommonJS syntax, which uses the require keyword. I put this in here on purpose because a lot of Node apps that we're going to be developing, especially things on the backend, for example, are going to be not available as ES modules. So we're going to have to get familiar with both styles of imports, both ES modules and the CommonJS syntax. So you're going to want to read through the NPM.js documentation for this particular package, FS Extra, to figure out how that actually works. So that said, then we want to install this FS Extra package. We want to create a main.js file and import that FS Extra package. So again, refer to the docs on NPM as well as their GitHub page if you want to figure out how to do that. We want to use this FS Extra package to create a text file in the directory that we're running this in, right? So that main.js file is going to be inside of our exercise 2 directory. So we want this main.js file to actually create a text file in the current directory with the text hello from Node.js. So just to give you a bit of an extra hint in here, since it might actually help, if you really want to think of how this file will look like, it can probably look like this. You can just say hello.txt. Okay, that extension is gonna be like, you can create this text file explicitly. We want to create a hello.txt file that has this content inside of it, which is this string. Okay, now you can give this function that you're going to be importing and researching this file name, and it will actually create it for us correctly. Then we want to use Node to run our main.js file. And once we do that, this file should be created with this content inside of it. Now you're probably saying, oh, well, I can just create this file myself and then put this content inside. Well, of course we could do that, but we want to do it through code because we want to show how we can dynamically create, delete, update content programmatically, right? Which if we want to do thousands of files, we could do that. If we just want to search for certain files, we can do that. All sorts of possibilities start opening up once we get more comfortable with working with files, for example. Now, I do want to note that these things that we're doing here are no longer in the realm of pure like vanilla JavaScript, in the sense that working with files is usually something we will only do in Node.js. We will not do this, for example, on front-end development when we're doing things like React or like DOM traversal and things like that, because sometimes we will work with files, but the way that we work with them is very, very different than how we work with them on the backend, where we have direct access to the computer. So just keep that at the back of your mind. Not 100% necessary to worry about right now. I will bring it up many, many times as we get to those topics explicitly when we work on it on the backend as well as on the front end. Then for the bonus for this one, I want you to take a look at some other functions that this FS Extra package might have and how you might be interested in using them to accomplish various tasks or automate certain things that might be kind of annoying for you to do that you might be doing manually right now. All right, so quite a lot in this one. This one's definitely a bit more challenging. Give it a shot and then we'll go through it together. Okay, so let's start by creating our exercise 2 folder. So I'll say new folder, exercise 2. And in here, I want to run my npm init. So I'm going to go up a folder And now I'm in my code folder, and then I want to go to my exercise 2 folder. And now I have nothing, so it's empty. Perfect. So inside of here, I want to create my npm init-y. So it just creates that package.json file, and there it is. Then I want to run npm install. I'll just use the alias to show you that, fs-extra. Perfect. So there it is. So you might be interested in seeing this result. We have installed 4 packages. Interesting. Okay, what does that really mean, right? We only installed 1 package, but it installed 4 packages. So we'll take a look at that later. Kind of interesting. Then what we want to do is create our main.js file. So I'm going to create a main.js in here. And then what we want to do is import our, fs-extra, and figure out how to do this using the NPM page or the GitHub. And we want to make sure we're not using ES modules, right? Which is why we didn't create a type module in our package.json. Then we want to use this to create a text file. So we want to kind of look up this fs-extra thing, figure out like how do you make a file on the file system. Okay, so when we run main.js, a text file, maybe like hello.txt will like randomly show up. Okay, so if I go back to Google, I'm going to go to npm again. I'll just do this from scratch just so that we get in the muscle memory for this. I'm going to search for fs-extra. And here we can see fs-extra it contains methods that aren't included in the vanilla Node.js fs package, such as all this kind of stuff. Okay, so I'm going to click on that. And we can see that this has 58 million downloads, quite a lot. So how do we install it? npm install fs-extra, so we did that already. Usage, we can see that we can do const fs equals require fs-extra. I don't know why they have this in here. This is a little bit confusing, but let's just go with this one. You can see that they have a whole bunch of different varieties of this, but it looks like they can just say like, you can do this now. So I'm going to do that. Again, please don't copy and paste. Just write it out manually. I know that sounds a bit silly, but I promise you that over time you will like really build that muscle memory, and it'll just copying and pasting code in general is just never a good idea, like pretty much ever, even if you already know how to write it. So I'm gonna come back here. I'm gonna go to main. I'm gonna say const fs is equal to require. Okay, interesting. So require and then fs-extra. Okay, so we saw in the ES modules video that this is the CommonJS syntax, right? So this is CommonJS. This require existed before ES modules existed. So Node needed a way to share code between different files, but before ES modules became a thing, right? So this require is that way, right? And the way that it works with require is you create a variable and then you assign it the result of requiring the library that you're importing from or the module that you're importing from. Okay, this is going to be just repeated over and over again. So this syntax and the ES module syntax, we're just going to be kind of switching it up depending on which libraries support which ones. Okay, so just so it makes sense, normally if this was ES modules, we could do something like this. We could say import fs from fs-extra. Okay, so since it's not ES modules, we can't do this. We have to do it that way. All right, so let's go back to npm. So scroll down a little bit. Let's see. Most methods are async by default. They will return a promise if a callback isn't passed. Interesting. Maybe there's some synchronous ones. So they have async with promises, async with callbacks. We haven't really looked at callbacks too much yet, apart from things like map and filter and reduce. We have the async await. And then here are the methods. Okay, so they have asynchronous versions and then synchronous versions. So I'm actually going to go with the synchronous versions just to keep it super simple so we don't have to deal with promises. Generally speaking, though, eventually, once you get working with very, very large files, you really, really do want to be using the asynchronous versions, which we'll get into in future videos. But for the sake of this video, it doesn't really matter too much. So we want to create a file. So how do we do that? So I'm gonna like look through these, copying, no, emptying, no, ensure, I don't really know what that means. Make dir p, make directory maybe, moving something. output file. Okay, that sounds promising. I'll open that one in a new tab. Output JSON, not really, because I don't have JSON. I just want a text file. Path exists, read JSON, remove, no, write JSON, no, again, because we want write. So maybe, is it write? But they don't have write, they just have output file. Okay, so yeah, you can see, I don't really know, right? I'm just going to go with kind of what makes sense over here. You can see that they have some information on kind of the older version of these, not older, the regular FS module, which actually comes built in with Node. This extra one, as you can probably tell from the name, is a bunch of functions that are built on top of the one that comes with Node that give us some extra functionality that usually is kind of annoying to build yourself if you were to manually code it. So I opened up this output file sync in a new tab. So let's take a look at that. So that looks like this. Output file sync, almost the same as write file sync, except that if the parent directory does not exist, it's created. Okay, that sounds useful, maybe. File must be a file path. Okay, interesting. So it looks like here are the parameters. File, which is a string, the data, which can be a string or a buffer, and then some options. Okay. So here's an example. We've already done this part, require. Here's the file path, it looks like. Okay, so for us, this is going to be hello.txt, right, for example. And then they're saying fs.output file sync file, which is this string, and then hello. Okay, so very similar to what we want to do, actually, right? And then they're saying they're reading it. Interesting. Okay, so you can actually write it and then you can read it back out. So let's try this, okay? I'm going to actually copy this almost exactly, but not copy and paste, copy it conceptually. So if I switch back to my editor here, I'll say const file is equal to, so I said I'm just going to call it hello.txt. Okay, then what they said is we can do fs.output file sync. So I'm going to do fs.output file sync. And this is going to take the path, so file, this is probably a better name is path, not really file in this case, but I guess I see why they call it that. And then we want to give it the thing that we want to write, right? So the data that we want to put into the file, in this case, the string. So I said that we want to put in hello from Node.js. So in this case, I will copy and paste and I'll just get rid of that. There we go. Okay. So we're saying, hey, FS, please go and output to this file here, hello.txt, this string. Oops. And hopefully that actually works. So we're not actually going to print anything out in this case because hopefully this just creates that file, puts in that string, and then kind of exits the program. So we should have that file here on our file system. All right. So moment of truth. I'm going to run Node. I'm going to run main.js, and fingers crossed, if I run this, we'll see a hello.txt file pop up over here on the left inside my exercise2 folder. And look at that. Okay, cool. So does it have the right text in it? And look at that. It totally does. Okay, perfect. Awesome. So we have our hello.txt file and that was created by Node using this FS library. Now, again, you can probably imagine that there is quite a lot going on behind the scenes here. Right? This is definitely not a trivial operation. This kind of FS module thing needs to figure out like what kind of operating system are you on, right? Like, do I have the permissions to write to this file? What if the file exists? What if there's no directory that exists? Like, what if, you know, the power cuts out as I'm making this file? There's all sorts of crazy things that can happen with this kind of stuff when it comes to very low level working with the operating systems. And it's kind of all abstracted for us by Node.js and this library that's actually built on top of Node.js, which is pretty beautiful. Right? So we can kind of just rely on these tools that other people have built for us painstakingly and worried about all of the errors and all the crazy things that can happen so that we can be happy with working at a much, much higher level and kind of getting on with our day and on with our exercises. So that said, let's take a look really quick at this package lock.json, right? If I open this, we saw previously that in exercise 1, when we opened up the package lock for Chalk, right, it didn't have any dependencies. What's interesting though about this FS extra is now if we open this up, we can see that it actually has a whole bunch of dependencies in here, right? It's using graceful FS. It's using JSON file, universalify. That was really hard to say for some reason, right? So this package relies on these packages right here. Okay, and it could be that these packages that it's relying on also rely on other packages, right? And then we end up going on this crazy rabbit hole of package hunting and downloading. And this is really what NPM does for us. It deals with all of this crazy package management for us behind the scenes. So we just run one simple command. Hey, I want to install this library or this package, and I just start using it. I don't have to worry about, are these the right version? What happens if one of these versions updates and breaks the whole thing? What happens if, they both share a package? Can I have some, sharing the gains there by not duplicating the packages? All sorts of stuff like this. It really deals with us behind the scenes over years and years and years of experience that the developers that have built NPM have gained. There are package systems like this for many other languages. For example, Python has something called like pip, and then Java has like all these other versions of package managers. And it's a concept that is taking off. So a lot of newer languages, for example, like Rust, have a really, really beautiful package system like Cargo. So it's becoming more common, and a lot of the pain that came from managing these manually, if you can imagine downloading these one at a time and making sure all the versions match back in the day, it's much, much easier now for us. We just run an install command and it deals with everything for us behind the scenes. We can update them all, we can uninstall them, install them, and we can even update them in the code if we really, really want to. Okay, I got a bit too excited there. So hopefully that helps to answer our exercise 2. Lastly, though, what are some other useful functions that might be here in FS Extra, right? So we looked at a couple of those. We saw that, we can do all these things. We can actually even read data back out of that file if we want, and actually print out the string inside. Very, very useful things. You can imagine how you can probably do something cool, like you can look at all the files in a folder, and anything that maybe matches a regular expression or matches a prefix or suffix or extension, you can like do something to it or print it out or even move them to another folder, all sorts of stuff like that. Pretty cool. Okay, let's go to exercise 3. All right, so this one is very, 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 very challenging. Okay, so I'm going to kind of just be pretty upfront. I wanted to put something in here that really tickled your brain as much as I could. This is a good example of something you might be expected to do kind of in real life as you're working with your own projects. You're going to be working with packages that have really random ways of like doing their own thing. And you really want to use it because it does the thing that you want, but just it's kind of complicated. It like kind of does it in a way that you would not have probably coded it yourself, right? So that's not to say that this package is bad. It just does things in a very unique way that many people are not used to using. I'm not used to using this syntax, for example, except a few times maybe in some other languages. So let's kind of go through this, and I'll point out kind of the parts where you should pay extra attention just so you don't get too stuck. So for this one, same thing. We want to create a folder called exercise 3. And inside of exercise 3, we want to do the same thing. We want to run npm init and just kind of do the -y if you want to create the default one. We do want to add type module for this one because this package does support modules. If you want, you can also use CommonJS because it actually supports both. So you can use either or for this one. I'm going to go with the modules since I prefer to use it whenever it's available. And then we want to use npm within this exercise 3 folder to install the commander package. Okay, I'll pull up the npm page for it really quick before I let you loose on it. But this is the package that we want. Then we want to create a file called hello.js. We want to import this program thing from the commander package. Okay, it's a named export. So I'll show you this in the docs. And then we want to write code to allow us to run our program with Node, but with some arguments, which is a new concept. Okay, so instead of just running Node and then our program like hello.js, we can actually give it some arguments, very similar to how when we run npm install something or npm ls or npm root and all these different things. It's a command line tool that has arguments, very similar to how a function has arguments. So in this case, it has a -n, which is a way to kind of name an argument. and we're giving it a single string as an argument. Okay, or in this case, I should really say a single word, not a whole string. And if we run this in this particular way, so if I run if I run node hello.js -n and then monkey, it would print out hello monkey. Okay, if I ran it with natter, it would say hello natter. Okay, so whatever we run this program with, it's going to print out that name for us. This -n is called the flag, and then this name here, which in this case is monkey, is the argument for that flag. Okay, and we can change that as we want. So again, this is very challenging. This is going to require a lot of back and forth to NPM, a lot of trial and error. You will get errors when you work on this. If you don't, please let me know, because you probably did it way faster than I did if you didn't get any errors. But I purposely put this in here so that you can challenge yourself and feel what it's like working with real world kind of tools. Okay, so before I let you go on that, I'm just going to pull up the docs for this. So if I go to NPM, I'm going to pull up Commander. You can see Commander is the complete solution for Node.js command line programs. All right, nice advertising there for them. If I click on that one, we can see that this is the install command right here. This is their GitHub link. I'll just open that on the side. It's definitely used quite a lot, huge amount of weekly downloads. If I scroll down a little bit, we'll see that we can npm install Commander, so we'll do that. And then we can see a bit of some examples, some quick start guides. This one looks to be pretty complicated. There are some other ones further down. You can probably follow, they talk about ES Modules versus CommonJS a little bit. If you go down a bit further, they have even more examples, and they have even more examples, right? So I'm going to leave it to you to figure out how to make this work. And this is purposely very annoying, okay? Because you're going to run into this a lot as you're using third-party tools. So keep that in mind. This can take a bit of time and a lot of trial and error. I know I keep saying that, but just hammering it in. So give it your best shot, and then we'll go through it together. Okay, so to start, let's just set this up. So I'm going to create a new folder here. I'm going to call this exercise 3. And in here, I'm going to open up my terminal. So I'll do cd ... I'll cd exercise 3, make sure I have nothing in there. I'm going to run npm init-y, create my package JSON. There it is. I'm going to run npm install Commander. There we go, one package. So it looks like it's kind of on its own. And then what we can do is try to actually figure out how this works. But I want to use ES Modules. So I'm just going to quickly come into the package JSON. And I'm going to do type module. There we go. Okay, so stepwise, we are almost done. We just need to create our hello.js here and here, hello.js. And now we are pretty much here, right? We want to be able to import this program thing, okay? And then we want to write some code so that when we run this file from the command line, so when I run node hello.js, I can say -n monkey, and it's going to, right now it does nothing because there's no code in there, but it should say hello monkey or hello whatever I put here. So if I change this to, my name, it's going to say my name. If you change to your name, it should say that. Okay. So let's figure out how we can make this work. So I'll open up my hello.js and I'll switch back to NPM. All right, so let's start reading through this. So we did the install. So I'm going to kind of read through this as if, we're kind of doing this for the first time together. So here I see, okay, const program. Okay, so here they have the require syntax. Okay, not ideal. I would like to use the ES module syntax. Let's scroll down a bit further. I can see a bit of how they're trying to use this. They're using the require syntax. Oh, it's this command thing. That looks kind of crazy. Maybe there's a simpler version if I scroll down here. Okay, so here we have some examples of CommonJS. We have an example of ECMAScript, MJS, of TypeScript here, right? So that's kind of cool. So at least we can support modules, it looks like. I'm not really sure what they're talking about with all these different file names. Let's scroll down a little bit more, see what we can get. So we can say, okay, now they're using the program. They're doing this parse thing. Okay, interesting. Options, don't really know what that means. I have no idea what's going on here. Okay, so, okay, cool. So over here, it looks like they're simulating what it's like if they were to run this pizza program with different arguments and flags. So -p, okay, and then they get an error. I guess that's coming from over here somewhere. And then they can give it different flags. Okay, so I see kind of a little bit of what happened. Building a picture in my mind of maybe a bit of how this works. They're giving it different arguments, and they kind of match to these options, I guess. And then they're using those options to log stuff out. That's pretty cool, pretty cool. So it looks like they keep using this program.option and program.parse thing. Okay, interesting, interesting. More options, more parse, more options. They got some if statements going on. Okay, so I kind of get it. This kind of goes on for quite a while. I don't want you to sit here and watch me read all these out. You know, you can probably imagine if you want to do crazy custom stuff, we could probably read through all this. But I am just kind of going to go with this kind of syntax and just hope it works with ES modules. So it looks like they're just using this program thing a lot. So I'm going to just try to grab program from this commander thing. Okay, so let me kind of go with this first. So I'm going to go with this. I'm going to say import command from commander. Oh, yeah, that auto typed for me, but I'll be okay with that for now. And then it's going to say const program equals new command. So const program equals new command. Okay, I don't really know what I'm doing here, but you know, maybe I'll just log out my program. Let's see what happens. So if I run node hello.js, okay, so I have some stuff being logged out. Interesting, interesting. So this is the command, and I guess now I can start using this new command, I guess. So if this is my program, I hope that they're using this program later on, right? So it looks like they kind of are. So they're using program here. All right, so program.option. Great, so I'll clear out my terminal here. So I'll not log that out for now. I just want to make sure it works. This is a good strategy, by the way, to make sure that the import actually works, because if I ran this program and I had some error, that would mean that the import's not working or I'm using it incorrectly. Okay, but it didn't give me an error, it gave me this program object, which is pretty great. Now I want to do program.option. And in here I want to do, so it looks like it takes a string, and then I can give it like a, okay, like a single letter and then like the name. Okay, so interesting. So I said I wanted a -n, and I wanted this to be the name argument, right? So I wanted this to be like name monkey, right? So it looks like they're saying comma and then -- and then the full name. So this is the shortened version, this is the longest version, longer version, and it's in like this format. Okay, so let me try that. So if I go back here to my hello.js, I'm gonna do a comma, and I'll say -- name. So I'm gonna say the short form is -n, comma, and then long form is -- name. Okay. Then they have this thing. Okay, so I'm guessing that means small pizza size. I'm guessing that means like the description. Okay, so I'll just say like your name. There we go. Why not? Your name. So I don't really know if this is going to work, right? You know what? Let's run this and see if it actually works. Is it going to give us an error? Okay, it doesn't give us an error. So that's good. So things may be happening behind the scenes. We don't really know. Then it's saying program.parse process.argv. Okay. This is not very well documented. I don't really know what's happening here. Is it happening anywhere else? I mean, okay, they just do program.parse over here. All right, interesting. You know what, let's just do that. Program.parse, let's see if that works. Parse, program.parse. Is that gonna give us an error? No, okay, we're still good. This documentation is a bit confusing for me to read. There's kind of a lot going on, and at least very quickly, it's not very obvious unless you were to read through all these options. Okay, so where were we? We were here. I'm gonna skip this. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't work. I guess we can see. So let's see if we can grab these options. Program.opt. So I'll say const options equals program.opt. Supposedly ops, is it ops? OPTS? Yeah, there we go. All right, so I'm gonna console.log out my options, whatever those are. Let's run this again. Okay, so something is happening. I get back this object, Okay, cool, cool. Let me try this with my -n, and I'm going to say monkey. Fingers crossed. Let's see what happens. Okay, okay. Interesting. So we get name true. Okay, so this is good because now we see that, you know, name is at least coming through. So this is coming from the -n, which is this name thing, but it's true. Okay, so that's kind of weird. So if I say console.log, it looks like they said you can grab the options dot and then the name of the thing. So debug small pizza type, which corresponds to these things. Okay, so if I do options dot name, so if I run this, it looks like I get true. Okay, so I don't really want true. I kind of see what they're doing. I guess they're saying like, does this option exist at all? I want the actual, I want my monkey to show up here. I don't want name just to be true. I want the actual value. Let's see how they do it. So looks like these are booleans, types, option types, boolean and value. Okay, okay. Okay, so looks like they have this here, this here. Okay, so now they're doing this angle bracket. Oh, I see. Angle bracket and then something. Okay, so maybe if I do like angle bracket and then I'll have like a value or name or something. I don't know. Let's go with that. Yeah, sure. Let's go with that. All right, cool. So that works. What, like, does this matter if I do a name like that? Does that matter? No, it doesn't matter. So it's just a placeholder, I guess. Okay, great. So now we're actually getting the command line argument, right? Which is -n, which is name. So this actually works the same way. So I'm going to run this 2 times. I'm going to run it that way. I'm going to run it as --name. And we should actually get the same result, right? Because this is the shorter syntax. This is the longer syntax. Very similar to NPM, has I for install as an alias, then install as a longer format. Okay, cool. So we're good. Now we're pretty close here. So this options.name has our monkey in it. So now I can just say console.log, and I'm going to put this in a template string. I'm going to say hello, and I'm going to do options.name and an exclamation point. And I'll just comment these out for now. All right, so moment of truth, if I change this back to the short form, -n, oh, fingers crossed. Yes, okay, look at that, it's pretty great. Hello monkey, right? And now if I change this to hello natter, awesome, perfect, look at that, that's pretty cool, right? So this was a process, right? As you can tell, like, what on earth is happening with all this crazy stuff, right? This seems like gobbledygook. I would never know how to do this unless I read the documentations. You can see I just fudged with a bunch of stuff just because I didn't want to read through it in detail. Ideally, you read through examples and implement them, but playing it with this in this way also is a good way to get practice with working with errors and kind of working backwards from things. Sometimes the documentation is really, really good and it's really easy to read, and you can actually get it up and running like in one go kind of thing, right? They just had a lot of examples, which is great if you want to build very robust applications. So it looks like we actually got it working. And the point of this is to show that we can do some really powerful things, right? Like very similar to how our NPM can do like an install and accept different arguments. Now we can run our program and give it arguments, right? We can actually do like dash something and then give it something, or we can do it in very similar to how NPM does it and maybe ignore the dash. I don't actually know if this library allows that. I'm sure it does, right? And then we can do things like maybe we can tell it a folder to delete stuff from, or a file to search for, or something on the internet to go and find, right? Very, very huge ocean of possibilities once we start working with command line arguments, and we will be building tools that actually utilize command line arguments, whether with this library or a different library in the future for sure. But just to give you a bit of a tease as to how that actually works behind the scenes. So that was extremely challenging. Definitely didn't expect you to get through that. The documentation for that is definitely quite hard to read through, but if you did get through it, awesome job. I think this is really, really good practice. Even if you failed and didn't get it and had to look at the solution with me, totally doesn't matter, right? As long as you tried and went through the NPM and the GitHub and tried and failed in Node and tried again and failed again, tried, that's all that really matters, because that's what happens in real life as you code these programs. So I hope you found these exercises valuable. I know it was quite a lot and quite a long video. but I really wanted to hammer this home because we're going to be using NPM literally everywhere as we build more complicated projects as we're getting further into this JavaScript series together. So that said, the purpose of going through modules and then NPM as well, in the next video, before we start wrapping up this part of the series and getting to another set of projects to get more practice, I would like to go over one of my favorite APIs, which actually technically is also not really part of JavaScript, but it's called the Fetch API. This is actually a web API, but it's so common and used in pretty much everything related to JavaScript, whether it's Node on the back end or other tools on the back end, and everywhere on the front end as well in the browsers, that we might as well just go through it because it opens up a whole host and literally an entire world of possibilities, because we finally will have an ability to reach out to the internet and grab different resources and work with things like APIs and eventually also build our own APIs. So to get a little bit of a slice of that action and get started with it, I'm super excited to get to the Fetch API and then get into some projects together right after that. So can't wait for that video. I'll see you there.